It's the Side Quest Podcast.
Imagine winning the ultimate political lottery. You know, you secure this historic 172-seat parliamentary majority.
Right, total dominance.
Exactly, the kind of unshakable dominance that basically guarantees your party a decade in power. But then imagine that less than 2 years later, your approval rating has just plummeted to -46.
Yeah, complete free fall.
You're losing 50-year strongholds to these hard-right upstarts, and your own party is actively trying to evict you from number 10 Downing Street.
That's wild.
It really is. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the stunning, hyper-accelerated political collapse of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And before we get into the actual mechanics of this downfall, I want to quickly note for you, the listener, that the sources we're working through today, which are from June 2026, they contain some highly charged perspectives from across the political spectrum.
Definitely. A lot of strong opinions in these reports.
Right. And as always, we aren't taking sides or endorsing any political positions here. We're just here to impartially break down the timelines, the data, and, the underlying logic of this crisis. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, I mean, it is a masterclass in how rapidly political reality can just disintegrate. Because to really understand the speed of this collapse, you have to look past the top-line number of that July 2024 landslide.
The 172 seats?
Right, yes. A massive working majority in the House of Commons. But the underlying data from that election revealed this glaring vulnerability. Labour achieved that staggering majority while securing the lowest share of the popular vote for any majority of government since records began in 1830.
Wait, since 1830?
Yep, 1830.
That statistic is wild. It's like building this towering, incredibly heavy skyscraper, but your foundation is just so narrow and shallow, right? Like the slightest gust of wind could threaten the whole structure.
That's a great analogy, and it really highlights the strange alchemy of the UK's first-past-the-post electoral system.
Because how exactly does a party translate a historically low popular vote into absolute parliamentary dominance?
Well, it comes down to vote efficiency and basically the total collapse of the opposition. Under first-past-the-post, you don't need a majority of the votes in a constituency to win the seat.
You just need one more vote than the person in second place.
Exactly. And in 2024, the Conservative vote didn't just decline, it violently splintered. You had millions of traditional Tory voters defecting to the hard-right Reform UK party.
Oh, so if the Conservative candidate gets, say, 30% and the Reform candidate gets 20%.
Right. Then a Labour candidate can just slip right through the middle and take the seat with maybe 35% of the vote. That's precisely the mechanism at play.
Wow.
Labour won hundreds of seats, not because the public fell in love with Keir Starmer's specific policy platform, but because the right-wing vote was fatally divided.
So they were voting against the Conservatives, not necessarily for Labour.
Exactly. Labour's electoral coalition wasn't this solid alloy. It was more like a temporary magnetic field. You had progressive left-wingers, centrist moderates, disillusioned swing voters, all just temporarily pulled together by their shared repulsion of the Conservative government.
But the moment the Conservatives were swept out of power, the magnet turns off. And those constituent parts immediately start repelling each other.
Right. And what compounded that fragility was how they immediately used their political capital. They focused on constitutional housekeeping instead of, material economic relief.
Like the House of Lords reform.
Yeah. Starmer used his early dominance to push through the House of Lords Act in March 2026, which ousted the remaining 92 hereditary peers.
So getting rid of the Earl Marshal and the Lord Great Chamberlain.
Exactly. Finishing the reform that Tony Blair started back in 1999.
Which, on paper, is exactly the kind of structural modernization a center-left government wants as its legacy.
It is. But you don't get to wear the armor of a constitutional reformer if the public thinks your government is fundamentally hypocritical. And that brings us to the massive trust deficit that arrived almost immediately.
Oh, right. The freebies scandal.
Yeah. September 2024.
Let's look at that. So reports come out that Starmer basically accepted tens of thousands of pounds in clothing for his wife, Victoria, from this wealthy Labour donor, Lord Alley.
Right. And records showed he accepted more gifts than any other MP since 2019. It instantly shattered the honeymoon period.
Because he campaigned on returning a sense of serious public service and high ethical standards to Downing Street?
Exactly.
I do want to push back on this slightly, though, based on the sources. Starmer argued that he hadn't broken any explicit parliamentary rules regarding actually receiving the gifts.
Yeah, if the declarations were late, yeah.
Right. And networking with wealthy donors is just kind of baked into modern party politics. So is this just a hostile, press-blowing, standard political gift-giving out of proportion? I mean, why did this specific instance cause his own MP, Rosie Duffield, to literally resign in protest?
Well, the severity of the backlash wasn't strictly about parliamentary rule books. It was about the mechanics of juxtaposition.
The optics.
The optics were terrible. It is politically toxic to accept luxury wardrobes while you are simultaneously deploying severe austerity measures on vulnerable populations.
Right. The winter fuel cuts?
Yes. While Starmer was sitting in donor-funded clothes, his chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was trying to plug a £22 billion black hole in the public finances by targeting the winter fuel payment.
And just for you, the listener, the winter fuel payment was a universal subsidy of about £200 to £300 given to pensioners to keep their heating on through the winter. And Reeves announced they were stripping this from roughly 10 million pensioners.
Restricting it only to those on the absolute lowest incomes.
Right.
And here's the most brutal detail from the analysis. The Treasury's own internal projections, which leaked, calculated the human cost of this cut. They projected that stripping away this £300 lifeline would actively push 100,000 pensioners below the poverty line by 2026.
Oh, wow. 100,000. So the juxtaposition is just devastating. You have a prime minister giving televised lectures about the necessity of tough choices, shared sacrifice.
Fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, fiscal responsibility, while his own household is being subsidized by a multimillionaire. The sources mentioned this resurrected the nasty party moniker.
Yes, which is usually a weapon used against the conservatives, but here it really stuck to labor. And when you alienate the electorate through that specific brand of hypocrisy, it instantly destabilizes your parliamentary party.
Because MPs are looking at their inboxes, seeing the rage from elderly constituents terrified about freezing in January, and they panic.
Exactly. And that panic forces the leadership into unforced errors. So by May 2026, the internal pressure reached a boiling point, and Starmer attempted this humiliating U-turn, suggesting they would look at widening eligibility for the payments.
But a forced reversal like that almost never buys a leader gratitude. It just projects weakness, right? It tells every faction in your party that your initial judgment was flawed and that you'll fold if pushed hard enough.
It signaled that the leadership was malleable, and that directly triggered the massive welfare rebellion. Having seen the government blink on winter fuel, over 150 Labour MPs prepared to rebel against the Chancellor's next target.
The disability benefits.
Right. They were trying to find £5 billion in cuts to the personal independence payments, the PIP benefits.
So you have junior ministers threatening to resign rather than vote for their own government's budget. The domestic economic coalition is completely fracturing.
Yeah.
But the analysis also points to a massive foreign policy fracture happening at the exact same time, specifically regarding Gaza.
Right. Starmer's cautious pro-Israel stance on the Gaza conflict alienated a huge swath of that temporary 2024 coalition, particularly Muslim communities in urban centers and the left wing of the party.
The sources show independent pro-Gaza candidates campaigning aggressively on this hyper-local outrage to unseat labor incumbents.
And the voters who didn't go independent started migrating to the Green Party, who were just capitalizing on the disgust over both Gaza and the domestic welfare cuts.
It sounds like he's trying to plug a leak on the left side of the boat, only to realize the right side of the boat is completely detaching.
That's exactly it. He has squeezed in this vice between the progressive left and the working class right. Reform UK is successfully branding his government as out of touch, metropolitan elitists who take free clothes while pensioners freeze.
Man, to navigate a vice like that, a prime minister needs impeccable political judgment.
You need a team that anticipates blowback before it happens. But the defining crisis of Starmer's tenure, the Mandelson affair, reveals a total collapse of institutional judgment.
Okay, we have to get into Peter Mandelson. He's the architect of New Labour from the 90s, right?
Yes, a legendary political operative.
But also a guy with an enormous amount of historical baggage. He was forced out of the cabinet twice under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And in December 2024, Starmer appoints Mandelson to be the British ambassador to the United States.
The geopolitical logic there was pretty straightforward. The incoming Trump administration responds to aggressive, highly networked political street fighters, rather than traditional career diplomats.
Which Mandelson fits perfectly.
He does. But what's fascinating here is the catastrophic blind spot Downing Street had regarding Mandelson's documented history with Jeffrey Epstein.
This is where it gets crazy. September 2025, the U.S. House Oversight Committee releases this massive tranche of unredacted Epstein files.
Right.
And right there in the documents is a birthday book for Epstein's 50th birthday, with a handwritten note from Peter Mandelson calling Epstein his best pal.
The paper trail was damning. They also released emails from 2008 showing Mandelson actively corresponding with Epstein while Epstein was battling his initial conviction for soliciting a minor.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Mandelson called the conviction wrongful, told him to fight for early release, and wrote, "I think the world of you," right before Epstein went to jail.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. How does someone with that kind of baggage get appointed to one of the most sensitive diplomatic posts on Earth? Did they not vet him?
Oh, they absolutely vetted him. And this is the revelation that dealt a fatal blow to Starmer. Mandelson failed his security vetting.
Wait, he failed the vetting?
He formally failed his in-depth security vetting in early 2025.
He failed the security check for the Washington embassy, and Downing Street just appointed him anyway.
They overrode the vetting failure. They assumed the political utility of having him in Washington outweighed the security concerns flagged by their own intelligence apparatus.
Wow.
So when the Oversight Committee files dropped in September 2025, Starmer had to stand up in the Commons, admit he shouldn't have made the appointment, and formally sack Mandelson on September 11th, literally days before President Trump was scheduled for a state visit to London.
The diplomatic humiliation of firing your U.S. ambassador on the eve of a presidential visit, that is staggering. But the fallout didn't stop there, right?
Not at all. It escalated. By early 2026, the U.S. Department of Justice released further files suggesting that back in 2009, when Mandelson was business secretary, he might have leaked sensitive UK government info to Epstein's network.
So we crossed the line from embarrassing correspondence to active national security breach and potential criminality.
Exactly. Which culminates in February 2026 when the Met Police arrest the 72-year-old Mandelson for misconduct in public office.
They raided 2 of his properties.
Yeah. And the internal mechanisms of Downing Street completely buckled.
Starmer's chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, who orchestrated the 2024 landslide, is forced to resign for pushing the appointment through despite the vetting failure.
And the very next day, the director of communications, Tim Allen, walks out.
The government is practically paralyzed. They had to dump 1,500 pages of internal communications just to try and explain who knew what about the vetting override.
And you just cannot hide that level of internal chaos from the voters. When a government looks that compromised, the electorate uses the first available opportunity to punish them.
And that opportunity was the local elections in May 2026. The stats here are just an electoral bloodbath. Labor lost 35 councils. They lost nearly 1,500 councillors, which was 60% of the seats they were defending.
The geography of those losses is what really terrified Labour MPs. Reform UK won 1,454 seats. And they didn't just win swing areas. They dismantled Labour in its historic heartlands.
Like Wigan, a former mining community, a Labour stronghold for over 50 years. Labour defended 20 seats there and lost every single one to Reform.
Complete wipeout.
And in Salford, they held on to just 3 out of 16 seats.
It's a fundamental severing of a historic identity. Starmer's personal net approval rating crashed to minus 46%, which naturally drew comparisons to Liz Truss.
Right, though the mechanics are pretty different. Truss blew up her government in 44 days with one catastrophic event, the mini-budget.
Sure.
Starmer is suffering this grueling death by 1,000 cuts, the freebies, the winter fuel cuts, the Mandelson disaster. So what does this all mean for his actual job? The sources note 98 MPs are publicly demanding he resign. Why is he still sitting in Downing Street?
It comes down to the Labour Party's internal rules. To formally trigger a leadership contest, 20% of Labour MPs must submit formal nominations for a challenger. With 403 MPs, that threshold is 81 signatures.
Okay, but if 98 MPs are openly demanding he resign, why haven't they cleared that 81 signature threshold?
Because sending a press release demanding a resignation is free. Formally organizing a coup behind a specific replacement is highly risky. If you miss, your career is over. The parliamentary party is locked in a Mexican standoff. You've got 3 major factions, each with a champion waiting in the wings.
Right. You have Health Secretary West Streeting for the centrists, Angela Rayner for the traditional union roots, and Andy Burnham representing the regional progressives.
Exactly. And none of those factions want to pull the trigger and start a civil war unless they're absolutely guaranteed their candidate will win. So they wait.
And Starmer is holding on by warning them that removing him would plunge Britain into utter chaos and invite a far-right government.
It's governing without authority. He's trapped in a bunker, relying on the mutual distrust of his rivals.
Incredible. So let's bring this all back to you, the listener. Why does this matter? It proves that a massive parliamentary majority is completely meaningless if a leader loses the trust of the public and their party through poor optics, broken promises, and unforced errors like the Mandelson appointment.
Definitely. And if we pull back, there's a final thought worth mulling over. If an electoral system can deliver a historic 172-seat majority based on the lowest share of the popular vote in 2 centuries,
Yeah.
and that government then immediately paralyzes itself from within, is this just the story of one prime minister's failure? Or is it a glaring warning that the electoral system itself is fundamentally broken and no longer capable of producing a government that truly represents the people?
That is a vital, really provocative question to leave you with, especially as we watch these majorities crumble in real time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives around you, and we will catch you next time.